Welcome, folks, and Happy New Year! One of my goals for starting off this new year is to focus more on original music, and in this first series of videos I'm going to take you on a creative journey by sharing with you the songwriting and production process of an original song that I'm currently working on, so you'll get to see the song develop as the process unfolds. Now, I'd like to be able to offer instruction on songwriting, but realistically this is too big a subject to cover simultaneously. But I will offer some tips along with the various stages and creative processes I go through when writing. Now, when I refer to songwriting, I mean both lyrics and melody. Some people write just one or the other, and other people are both lyricists and musicians. Now, I had an idea for a lyric last month, just before Christmas. I was at home and I was feeling a little bit down the dumps, but needless to say, this is usually a good time for artists to create. That is when emotions are running high. So it occurred to me just how great it must be having someone around when you're feeling alone. And that idea basically became my song title, which I've got here in front of me, and the inspiration for writing a song. Now, I tend to find it easier to have a lyric idea fleshed out first, and then begin work on the chord progression and melody. Having an idea for a song already written down, for me at least, inspires the melody and the overall feel of the song. I've heard famous artists such as Billy Joel say that they write the music first and then come up with the lyrics. But 9 times out of 10, I find it easier to do it the other way around. Plus, I think I end up with a better song when I'm writing music with a subject in mind. One thing I cannot do is just sit down and write a song, at least not a good one. So that would be my first tip, really. Don't try and force a song. Wait until you are really feeling it or experiencing something in your life that urges you to write it down and tell the world about it. So it is exactly this that led to the song I'm presently working on. And as mentioned, the idea was born out of being at home and longing for some company, so I decided on the title, Must Be Great Having Someone. So that's sort of the first version of the song that I ended up with, and that's the title I have. I then started writing down some words based on this idea, and I often find it easier to write the chorus first because this is most often what contains the song title or the lyrical hook. In this case, however, I started off with a verse and then a single chorus. So I've got that here in front of me in this rather old book, which you can see is falling apart and filled with lyrics. That's another tip, though. If you get ideas for songs, make sure you've always got a book handy that you can write them down in, or some other recording device. But what I did last month was I basically scribbled down my ideas for a verse and chorus based on that title that I came up with. Must be great having someone. So that was what I originally came up with. So you'll see I've gone through a few drafts already, and basically I start by writing down my initial ideas on paper, coming up with a melody and a chord progression, and then transferring this to a Word document. Now, I then add to this bit by bit, and I keep the old drafts saved separately so I can always refer back to them. So you can see I've got half a dozen different versions of the song here, and I've kept all the different versions so I can always go back and look over what I've already done and maybe even resurrect some old ideas. Now, I haven't even really discussed the music side of things yet, and as I said, this is a big subject. But the main thing to keep in mind when writing a melody is whether it would sound good and pleasing to the ears if it was, say, being played by a solo instrument instead of being sung. For example, would the tune sound good if it were being played by a trumpet or a flute or a violin? If you listen to the work of the great classical composers, you will hear that their melodies have stood the test of time, independent of any lyrics. That is, an orchestra can play the tune and you will know it instantly. So for me, a melody needs to have a logical flow and it needs to be singable. Again, this is a big subject, and then there is the process of coming up with a satisfying harmony. Now, I will always write a melody and harmony together at the same time, since I find that a chord progression, that is the rhythm of the chords and the chords themselves, will often help dictate the sound and the flow of the underlying tune. So, as I mentioned, you'll see that I've gone through several reiterations of the song. And in this draft here, which is draft 2, for instance, I've replaced this chord here, which originally was, in draft 1, was originally a B flat 7 chord. I have replaced it with a B flat minor 7. So just little things like that. So it's not just writing new lyrics, but it's also coming up with different ideas for chords. Now, I also made changes to the title. As you can see, I started off with the title, Must Be Great Having Someone. And then I decided to go with a title called It's Always Great Loving Someone. But I was worried that the first title might sound a bit negative, and I wanted the song to have a more positive vibe to it. However, I also felt that this other title, It's Always Great Loving Someone, I felt it was a bit cliche, and I was determined, really determined to write a song that didn't have the word love in it. So I settled on combining both the titles and came up with a new title, It's Always Great Having Someone. Yeah, that's this last draft here. That's where I've come up with a title, It's Always Great Having Someone. And that way the song could be interpreted in more than one way, and it would send out hopefully a more positive message. Now, in terms of production, I'll always start off with recording a vocal and piano demo at the same time. Now, usually I go through several drafts or several versions of this, such as adding more verses and deciding on the final key. So in this case, I've stuck to the original key of G flat major. The opening chord is actually a G flat over a D flat in the bass. So that's another idea there. Always, you can always play around with different bass notes. You don't have to just sit on the root note all the time. Obviously, we've got the root, the third, and the fifth of the G flat major chord. And in this case, I've gone with the fifth in the bass. Okay. So I started off with G flat there. In the chorus, it goes into D flat. So there's kind of a separate tonality in the chorus in D flat major. Okay, so I've got a bit of a chord progression going on in the chorus. It starts in D flat. Now, after I've done all that, I'll come up with a rhythm track, and usually this is via a drum loop on the keyboard. So the one I started off with in this song is sort of like an R&B kind of feel, which sounds like this. So that was my initial idea, and I had the tempo there set at 104 beats per minute. So that's the other thing I do. I always make sure I come up with a tempo and then try to stick to that, because obviously if I start changing the tempo once I've started doing the actual production, that's going to complicate things further down the line. So you need to decide on the tempo of the song. So at this point, I will then open a new project file in Cubase, which is what I use for recording, and start adding layers, usually in the order of bass and keyboard / synth, and finally backing vocals and harmonies. Now at this point I need to get a musician friend of mine involved to help with the production and offer his separate creative input. Because whilst I can record and produce music demos, more basic demos and arrangements at my computer here, I don't have all the necessary tools and mixing capabilities to bring it up to a more professional standard. But more about that later. Right now I'm going to include at the end of this video the initial chord progression I came up with on the day I started writing this song. That is the very first recording I made. And then I'll follow this with a separate upload featuring a live piano vocal version of this song as it currently stands. I'll then take you through various production demos so you can follow the process with me and hopefully get some enjoyment out of that. So thanks for tuning in, and stand by for updates as the song progresses. Please feel free to offer your thoughts and insights and any personal experience you have had with writing your own music and songs. It'd be interesting to hear what your experience has been. So thanks for stopping by. See you soon and have a great day.